Welcome along to part 2 of NUFC Matters with Neil Mitchell, Steve Hastie, and we've got special guest Ian Mearns with us today as well. So second half, we're going to talk a little bit about football, and it makes a change from the takeover. Ian, we stayed up, which is, you know, we're led to believe that's now supposed to be something we celebrate after 13 years of Mike Ashley. What's your views on Steve Bruce and the season that we've just witnessed, albeit we've got 2 games left?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion between me and my mates about this, and there is some disagreement, and a number of my mates think that, you know, Steve Bruce should be given another chance. But you know what? When we started to put the results together, and I looked at the remaining fixtures, I thought, oh, we've got a good chance here. We might get like 48, 49 points, but that's now like looking, you know, pie in the sky, frankly. You know, a lot of the punditry that I listen to on the telly, you know, the Carragers and the Nevilles and people like that, are all saying, oh, give Steve Bruce a chance, and, you know, Graham Souness and people like that. You know, what a great job he's done. I would like to ask all of those pundits, honestly, an honest question. If he's so good, would they have him managing the club that they support? Honestly, right? And, you know, I'm afraid the answer probably, in most cases, would be, no, we think we'll stick with Klopp, or we'll stick with Mourinho, or we'll stick with whoever else, you know? And therefore, from that perspective, you know, if there's going to be a change of ownership and they really do have higher ambition, well, the higher ambition should include high ambition at all levels, and that includes the manager. Because I'm afraid to say that, look, I know that Steve Bruce has been dealt a pretty poor pack in terms of the cards that he's had. But, you know, if we're really going to go on, the question I would honestly ask fans, heart of hearts, and, you know, nice blokeism and all the rest of it, do you really want Steve Bruce in charge of a significant investment programme for the club and taking the club forward in terms of the strategy and tactics that he employs and how he changes the game on the pitch when things aren't going right? Because I'm not seeing it myself.
Yeah. Steve, you've done a little bit of research before we came on air today, because there's been quite a heated debate on Twitter about our strikers. One lad, I think it was Josh Blakey, if I remember rightly, was defending, including a video which I think he must have made or knocked up, defending Joelinton. Obviously, Malcolm MacDonald, of course, who's on the show every week, is very, very critical of Joelinton. But yeah, you did a little stat thing on Andy Carrol, which again, a lot of people are feeling that Andy Carrol deserved a new contract. Of course, I didn't think he deserved one. But have you got those stats to hand?
I have, yeah. Andy's made 17 appearances this season for Newcastle. 13 were as a sub. He hasn't scored. He's laid on 4 assists. And those 17 appearances amount to 582 minutes on the pitch. He obviously, because he hasn't scored, his average shots to goals are 0. But last season, when he was at West Ham, he only played 18 games. So he's 1 game behind last season when he scored 1 goal for West Ham. So his average was, his average is 0.00 for us. His average at West Ham was 0.06. If, you know, when you go on this ridiculous stats. But, I mean, people then go on about what Andy brings to the team. He's had 15 shots this season. He's only actually hit the target 4 times out of those 15 shots even. So, yeah, what is he? Is he a deep line centre-forward link man? Is he someone who the ball just bounces off? So, in terms of comparisons with Joelinton, he's no better nor worse than Joelinton, other than the fact that Joelinton scored 2 goals. And we got Andy for nothing, and we paid 40 million for Joelinton. But you look at Joelinton as an example. I'll give you some stats here. He's made 36 appearances this season. That's league appearances. Supermac asked for, didn't he, last week, and he's gone on a couple of times. Is it in his contract that he has to play? Well, we've played 36 games, and he's made 36 appearances this season, either starting or on the bench. So I'll leave that one open for Malcolm to then digest when he's next on with you, Steve. He's been involved in 11 wins, 15 defeats. He's had 50 shots, for Newcastle this season, Joelinton. He's hit the target 15 times, so his accuracy rate is 30%. He's quite good at passing. He's had 799 passes. He averages 20 passes a game. He cost Hoffenheim £1.98 million, and we paid £40 million for him. He spent 2 seasons of his 4 seasons when he was at Hoffenheim on loan to Rapid Vienna, where he made 45 appearances for them. 15 of those appearances were as sub, and during those 2 seasons, he scored 15 goals. So he's averaging, 7.5 goals a season at Vienna. At Hoffenheim, he only played 25 games for them in total. And 5 of them he came on as a sub, and he scored 7 goals. So there's a 7, 7.5, 7. If people want to say he's underperforming, we could see he's underperforming because he's only scored 2 for us out of 36. But it's been his most productive season in terms of appearances that he's ever had as a striker. So
he wasn't a striker at Hoffenheim, though.
Well, apparently not. Apparently he wasn't a striker. So they say. But you look on the Hoffenheim's list and they've got him marked down as a striker. But he's a striker who's not a centre forward. He's a striker who plays alongside another striker. Or he's a striker who plays wide on the left. So that probably means he's a striker who... I had this... Somebody asked us this question. I said, maybe Steve Nixon thought he was like he was a Thierry Henry who played left wing and we could convert him to a striker that Wenger brought in and convert him and took him a couple of seasons. And I just went, you know what, Steve? You're delusional if you think he's a Thierry Henry. You know, he's not a Thierry Henry. Never mind a Thierry Henry, you know.
I'd love to follow the money, that 40 million quid, where that all has ended up. I'd like to see the way in which that whole 40 million quid has been subdivided and exactly where each £1 million has ended up. I'd love to, you know.
Just how would you buy it? What's going on in a club that buys a player for 1.98 and then manages to sell him after having them for 4 seasons but having them on loan for 2 with such a low productive rate of appearances and scoring, and they managed to get £40 million for him? We want the guys at Hoffenheim to come and run our football club, I think.
Well, when they got the phone call, asking if he was for sale, they thought it was from Camelot.
They thought they'd won the lottery, definitely.
It's gone on and on and on, this, hasn't it? The debate all the way through the season. I've got to be honest, I haven't been, I haven't been keen on Joelinton at all. I'm all for giving people a chance, but, it's got to be the last chance saloon for him now, hasn't it, really? And Newcastle, it's going to be a big loss, but they're going to have to look at shipping him out, new owners or not.
Super frustrating. I saw that argument on Twitter, Berwin. Actually, no, Josh, rather, sorry. And he's a canny kid, but his views about he's quite firm on his opinions about Joelinton. So I knew that was going to be an argument that was going to go on and on and on and rumble away. So I kind of stayed out of it, really, because I still say there's a player in there somewhere, but he's certainly in the centre forward. He's not.
No.
I think the Germans have a term for a wide striker of his type, I think Raumdeuter or something like that. It basically tends to be a bigger, wide man who plays off the front and pulls wide and pressures full-backs. And I've seen none of that from him either. His second touch is frequently a tackle. He really has that sort of... just every now and again he'll show something. That goal he scored against Spurs, that's a bloody good goal when you look at it and takes talent. And so you're like, well, okay, there's something in there. But I'd like to know what the scouting team saw in him to say, right, well, here's our main target. We want him. We think we can convert him. We think he can do this for us. Oh, and by the way, it's going to cost more than what Stuart Donald paid for Sunderland Football Club. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. And as Ian rightly says, I'd love to follow some of the money, because I bet some of that's disappeared to various agents here and there. The drain out of the game of money is one of the reasons so many clubs are now in the post-COVID world getting into trouble and getting into bother and into some of the positions they're in. It's why League One are talking about wage caps, for example. I mean, good grief. Teams are suffering, and they're going to suffer even more below the top flight. But I think some of the top flight ones as well. We've already seen what's happened at Wigan, who, by the way, maybe in the time that our owners and directors tests have happened, they've been transferred, they've been bought, gone into administration, and may have their new owners approved all in the time our owners and directors tests have been going on, by the way. That's a nonsense in itself, but I know that the English Football League have proved time and again that their owners and directors tests are as much use as a chocolate fire guard, really. So, yeah, but with Joelinton, it's super frustrating because he just looks lost, and he doesn't look like he's getting any proper support. There's verbal support coming from the manager, but Bruce is an island at the moment because he doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah,
and so that everybody's sort of like stuck in this limbo, and for the players that can't be helpful either. And you take the stats away, because you know I'm not a big lover of stats, full stop, in football. But take the stats away, just use your eyes, see what's happening on the pitch.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look good, and he doesn't look good, and he looks bereft of confidence, and he looks out of his depth.
To use an old cliche, Neil, I mean, sometimes when you see the ball going to Joelinton, I would struggle to kick the ball as far as he traps it.
Aye.
Yeah, it's a good point. Ian, I know you've got to go, so I'm going to ask you a couple of player-related questions. First of all, the loan players that we brought in. Just want to know, is there any of those players that you would keep? And secondly, the Matty Longstaff saga has obviously dragged on, over the last few weeks. Just wanting to know whether you think, Newcastle should be pushing the boat out to keep him.
Well, I mean, I think Matty Longstaff's a very decent prospect, but and obviously you've got to give the lad credit because he scored a great goal against Man United, amongst others, But it's a question of how much do you push the boat out, given the new financial world that we're in, because it's a question of having an understanding of what the real market looks like, and I've seen some speculation that he's been talking to, or his agent's been talking to Udinese for 30,000 a week. I think that would make him their top paid player, from what I've seen. And that doesn't look right to me, maybe if I was an agent, I would be saying that as well. But, in terms of negotiation, I like Matty Longstaff. I think he's a decent player, one for the future. I hope he stays at the club, but I wouldn't be pushing the boat out. I don't think much beyond what the club have already offered him, from what I understand. I think in terms of the current loan players, look, I mean, I've seen lots of players come to Newcastle over the years, particularly come from abroad, and they've taken a year to settle in. I mean, I remember one player who, in his first season, I thought struggled badly, but then went on to be one of my favourites, and that was Nobby Solano.
Yeah.
In his first season, I think he struggled to get to the pace of the game in the top division in England. But after that, I thought he was magnificent. And frankly, I would have Nobby Solano back at the club now, just actually how to coach kids, how to trap a ball. He could take a ball down anywhere, and I just thought his first touch was excellent. Just doesn't matter how, where he was. So I mean, I think that there's that element of it, because the Premier League has just played at a frenetic pace, which quite often overseas players do take a time to settle into. I think Lazaro looks interesting, but I mean, I wouldn't be pushing the boat out for him. And I'm not convinced about by Bentaleb, I'm afraid, so that's a couple of them anyway.
Ian, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I know you're going to have to go and sort the world out and go and kick Boris up the backside as usual. So I'll let you crack on, mate, and I hope we can get you back on again, because to be honest, it's great just to have an MP on, from the local area, who I voted for in the last election as well, it has to be said. So great to have you on Ian, and hope we can get you on again.
And at least I know who my other voter is, Stevie, anyway.
All right, mate. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Ian.
Bye, Ian.
Cheers, Neil. Bye-bye.
Great to have Ian on. Absolutely top bloke. And you can follow him on Twitter. And, of course, lads, it's about having people on who can answer the questions, I suppose, and you can certainly answer questions on anything parliamentary.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
having that
really
kind
good
of insight's important, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. But anyone's got any questions, give them a shout. We'll probably have to go into a part 3, so just to let you know that, first and foremost, because Zoom only allows you 40 minutes when you've got more than 2 people on. Christopher Algris says, I know this is not how it works, but say Richard Masters gives you half an hour before the Premier League X committee to make the fans' appeal case for the takeover. What would you tell them? So, Neil, first and foremost, what would you say to them?
The thing that people have to grasp about Newcastle United, and it's the thing that is the heart of the matter, is when you own the club, you literally own the heart of the city. The synergy between the club, the city, and the community that it serves, and the region that it represents. We're a club of supporters in 3 counties. We sit in the heart of the city. When the club is up, the city is up. The effect that this is having on the supporters and the community and now with this delay is a stranglehold. And it's an important turning point for the club. And not just for the club, but potentially for the city. That if the proper investor buys Newcastle United with the right intention, makes the right connections in the city, and regenerates, and look at the Abu Dhabi Man City example, and I'm quite sure they have looked at that, because the amount of the relationships between Saudi Arabia and the UAE are very strong, and they don't want to be beaten by little brother, and the potential for the city to explode, to strengthen international relationship with a country that the government have said themselves that they want to strengthen an international relationship with, rightly or wrongly, and let's try and take some of the politics out of that, but that is what the direction that the government wishes to look at. That we must stress that we as a club could be central in helping to give examples back to Saudi Arabia about how things should be done. That we are an inclusive, connected fan base. We don't turn anybody away, we accept everybody. The Newcastle United fan base is rich, and it's enlightened, and it understands, and we can pass some of that back. There can be a 2-way street thing there that everybody benefits from. This stupid little club in the north that everybody says is insignificant, and it's causing all this problem. And right now, we are in limbo, and we are being strangled, and that needs to be released. And the right people taking this forward are the people who have the bid on the table right now.
Steve, same question to you, mate.
Yeah, a very similar answer. And the only thing I would add is the fact that if the Premier League are worried in any way, shape or form that they're letting some sort of genie out the bottle, Newcastle fans, if the last few months have shown anything, will be the eyes and ears of anything that they feel is not going well, or not going correctly, or not being done properly by the owners, right across the whole business, to be perfectly frank, because we have an opinion on everything, and we'll be the watchful eyes and ears on behalf of the Premier League, if that's what they're looking for. Because we'll hold that football club to account. We'll hold those owners to account if we feel as though that there's something happening that is wrong across a whole multitude of topics. So there should be no fear on that respect. And in terms of what we hope to bring into the city, I think Neil said everything there in terms of what there is to be gained in the Northeast by having new owners at Newcastle United and at a football club that can compete in the Premier League, and what it will mean for the Premier League worldwide. and the excitement that it'll bring even more excitement to the Premier League by having Newcastle United rattling the cages up the top of that division right across, because we have a huge potential and we have a huge following worldwide.
Yeah,
there's quite an irony, isn't there? And that's the people who've been telling us for years to sit down and shut up and stop complaining about Mike Ashley are now telling them to rise up and suddenly be champions of human rights and all sorts. And the bottom line is, what they're failing to see is that by demonstrating some of the things we've done under Mike Ashley, the fan base is prepared to be the club's critical friend all the time. And with that will continue, no matter whose name is above the door and in which language that name is written in. Doesn't matter. It's still our club. And we will still raise points. If we think there's something going on that we don't agree with, and we think that that's going to tarnish our football club, will they get a reaction? Oh, yes, they'll get a reaction. And the one thing I know Arabic owners don't like is they don't like the visual aspect of something like a protest or something like that. If that was to come to that underneath Arab owners, that would be disaster for them. It would upset them very greatly, more so than Mike Ashley. And I think they understand what they're getting themselves into, that they have a fan base who are very prepared to turn around and say, hey, don't like this. No, we will be your critical friend. And that's a really important relationship.
Yeah, great points, lads, as always. Stuffy Boy Ray says, is it true the 30 Sodexo workers at St James's Park are to be made redundant? Our reluctant owner should be held to account for dereliction of duty. The club is on a knife edge right now, and we desperately need the takeover to go through. Jerry Sue says, as always, I'm a when, not if guy. Am I just being cynical? But is it too far-fetched to think some elements are delaying the green light to try and disadvantage Newcastle United at the start of the season, when the NUFC takeover happens, thereby eating into the transfer window? Steve, is that a little bit paranoia, do you think, on some of the fan bases, point of view? Or do you think, there could be elements at work? We've heard Ian Mearns earlier on the show, talking about Man United fans and various people supporting other teams. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, is it?
No, of course it's not. It's not. The whole saga has just dragged on so long. We've got to remember, if it wasn't for COVID, the players would be back training by now. Would be halfway through the transfer window. Would be back training. They'd probably round about this time be thinking about heading off on a pre-season tour. Yeah. And if in taking COVID's a side issue, people said that COVID created a problem for the Premier League because they couldn't meet up. I mean that's incidental, because anything and everything can be done. But that's where we would have been. We would have been ready to start the season in less than a month. Well, in one respect, we're quite lucky that we're not in that situation, and we're not. The window's still going to be open until mid-October, and the league's not going to restart until the beginning or middle of September. Fixtures haven't been come out yet because we haven't finished this particular league yet. This particular season. But we're all paranoid about everything. We're all getting caught up. We're all looking now, and this is Newcastle. This is what we're like. We're desperate for this to happen. We're desperate for answers. We're desperate for to move on, and we love our football. So naturally, we're interested. Naturally, we're raising these points, and we're putting questions out there to try and basically understand this absolute time warp that the Premier League has thrown us into. And we're not even shouting at the Premier League. We're just asking the questions. We're probing for answers, because we can't understand it either as a fan base. We cannot understand what the issues are. And I think Neil's covered it earlier when we talked about the fact that this has moved on to the business relationship, and that feels as though the owners and directors tests now completed. And to a degree, I agree with him. I agree. In fact, I agree entirely with that scenario. And it's within the control of the Premier League to just get this finalised, and the delays. But let's see where the next week, because that's what it's going to be. We are now looking week to week. We're no longer looking day to day, are we? We're looking week to week now.
Yeah, 100%. Loads of points coming in. Kumayama said, it seems unlikely like any announcement will come before the end of the season now. Do you think it's possible that the new owners will come in with a bang? New manager, couple of signings, clear paths for the future. It seems like they'd like to do things with plenty of gold coating. Neil, I'll give that one to you.
That's very much a regional way of doing things. The thing you've got to decide whenever you're handed something that's gold over here is it real gold or is it just a foil that you can scrape off? But yeah, I mean, that would be very much the style of the region to come in with a bang. There is a scenario whereby if things have been approved pending whatever end of season or satisfactory negotiations with being and compensation or whatever, that there's things happening in the background and things are ready to go. Certainly have to be with Eid imminent as well. A fact that I genuinely hadn't even thought about until the day when I saw Steve mention it. So yeah, I mean that very much would be the way I could see them doing things. I mean, just nipping back to the previous point there when you mentioned about the Sodexo redundancies, there's a lot of things happening which are actually symptomatic of the post-COVID football world, and those redundancies probably aren't anything to do with the takeover, and they're not anything to do with Mike Ashley. They're everything to do with the fact that there's no crowds going in, and they don't think there's going to be crowds until a certain point of next season. And as a business, that's a crippling. And that's the kind of business decision that's going to be made in football clubs and businesses associated with football clubs at all levels of the game over the next 6 months. It's going to be carnage. It's going to be carnage. I was talking to some of the Leeds lads yesterday, watching their game and getting excited about coming up. But they're in a position where they've got a buyout clause depending on promotion with this player that they've got on loan from one of the Red Bull teams, and they're trying to get out of it because they don't want to pay the 20 million, and they're getting promoted. And it's because they believe the finances are totally different now. They've had no crowd now. As good as their cardboard cutouts with Osama bin Laden and Fred West and a few others in that crowd, and amusing as that is, they're not buying a pie. They're not putting money in the club's coffers. And so there's clubs at all levels are going to have to make business decisions, and businesses associated with football clubs are going to have to make business decisions that are absolutely COVID related, that are absolutely related to the nature of the game and the fact that some leagues have been stopped and other leagues have gone on but without crowds. And the clubs that live hand to mouth, rely on those weekly gate receipts, they're going to suffer.
Yeah. Steve, are we looking at that scenario? Do you think we'll see the new owners come in and they'll be prepared? They will have ducks in a row. They'll have sorted out the managerial situation. I mean, I would presume they would have done because Steve Bruce I don't think will be head coach next season under new owners.
I hope they have, Steve. I really do hope they have. I mean, we talked about transition a few weeks ago and last week, I think. The topic came up of the structure and the club moving forward and the transition and where they're going and the post-COVID, medium to long-term plans that they have for the football club and how they can implement them. And I'm sure they've been sitting juggling all sorts. As Neil says, the whole business is changing, but it has to change right across the club. Players need to look at that. The PFA need to look at it. It's no good you're just standing there saying, well, I was on 90 grand a week, so I want to remain on 90 grand a week. Those type of questions, those type of situations, especially when you've got a situation where people are losing jobs who are on like 20 grand a year,
Yeah.
But the whole Sodexo situation, as I said right at the start in part one, is because of the structure that Newcastle United and Mike Ashley employed, whereby he contracted out all of the catering and the security and et cetera, as part of his business model. He's actually been paid. He's had the money from Sodexo. for the next season. Whether or not they've got some sort of penalty clause in it or clawback or whatever, that's a commercial thing. But as far as Newcastle United concerned, they've got a contract with Sodexo, so X number of Sodexo take the profit, so it's Sodexo who's taking the hit.
Yeah.
What would have been probably better is if we'd seen a scenario where Newcastle United and Sodexo had been working together and been doing something in the community for the foreseeable future that supports needy causes in the community, that can provide a service. And it doesn't have to be a free service, it could be a payable service, but at least it's a service of such that supports communities and supports the people who are struggling out there at the moment, keeping their employers in a job, but also helping other people who have lost their jobs and perhaps are struggling financially, and hence struggling with food, which is one of Sodexo's most productive aspects of their business model. Sodexo had everything. Sodexo run Northumberland prison for God's sake, So they're not only running a prison, but they're running the catering at St James's Park. They're a huge, big corporation, massive big corporation, and they're just looking at the top line, aren't they? They're looking at the profits and they're going, oh, profits are down. Oh, we're not getting money coming in from there. We have to do that. It should be, we're all in this together, and we should be looking from as a community aspect and see, well, what can we do? Because you, Mr. Sodexo, will need us in 18 months' time when everything's back to normal. You'll be expecting us to come in and buy the pies. Maybe we won't, maybe we won't because of that, or maybe new owners will come in and say, well, you weren't very good at the community, so we've been advised by supporters that we should look for a catering contract with somebody else. They need to think about what they're doing out there. It's a much, much bigger thing for them than I think they realise.
Yeah, I would agree. Perfect way to end the second half, that, lads. So we will be back for a third part where we will carry on taking the questions from Twitter. But for now, that's the end of part 2. Thanks very much.